Thank you so much, Dr. Gracie, not just for this evening, having a few fleeting moments with this group of scholars and voices, transformational prophets who will carry on far beyond my time and space. Thank you. Let me say that it's an honor to be here repeating for a few fleeting moments, and especially in the setting of your embrace of the life, teachings, and work of Howard Thurman. And again, Dr. Gracie, thanks to you for your invitation, and thanks to you, Davis, for your hospitality. Let me begin with a few personal items. I grew up in the country, the rural area of LaGrange, Georgia. And in those early years, there was an elementary school in LaGrange. I did not attend that school. It later became known as the Kelly Grammar School. Kelly Grammar School. Mr. Kelly was the principal of that school for a number of years, and a deacon, First Baptist Church, LaGrange, and a graduate of Morehouse College. His daughter, who is buried in LaGrange, was the first wife of Dr. Howard Thurman.
Yes.
They married, of course, and she died at a very early age. And they were blessed with one daughter. And a few years later, Dr. Thurman married Mrs. Sue Bailey. And to that marriage, one daughter was born. There is one grandson now, Anton, who lives in New York and is quite interested and dedicated to the preservation and dissemination of the writings and work and message of Dr. Howard Thurman. Because of, out of that experience, I was introduced to Dr. Thurman at an early age through persons in LaGrange, Georgia, who knew him, one of which was a classmate. Others, especially those who studied at Morehouse, had had the opportunity to meet him, to hear him, and be inspired by him. I attended the East Depot High School on East Depot Street. That was located about 6 miles from where I lived. and my transportation to that high school was walking. So 6 miles one way made 12 miles plus. We took a roundabout places one day, so I didn't need physical fitness engagement. And there are many, many backstories that I could give there, but I will resist that temptation. On East Depot Street was a gentleman whose last name was Snellings, who graduated from Morehouse, class of 1923, which was Dr. Howard Thurman's class. So walking from school or having a conversation with the pastor of First Baptist Church or 2 or 3 people in the community who had met Dr. Thurman personally, I was introduced to him at an early age. And then after entering Morehouse, had the opportunity to meet and hear him. He was such an impactful person that for the rest of your life you would never forget having met him or having heard him or what he said. The first lecture I heard from him at Morehouse was dealing with the meaning of maturity. This was in the 1950s. And he said, as his punchline or the thesis statement, I become a man or woman only when I learn how to negotiate between wish and fulfillment. And then he spent about 25 minutes dealing with that. And he talked about how we quickly respond to the movements and especially the cries of a baby. Quickly fulfilling the child's needs. But as you grow older, you are introduced to a rather shocking, maturing word. Wait. And I become mature as a person only when I learn how to negotiate between wish or desire and fulfillment. That was the first time I heard it. The second time I heard him was a church setting, Friendship Baptist Church, Atlanta, Georgia. It was their, Dr. Grayson, their annual Men's Day. I was there under duress. Because in those days, in those ancient days, when you pledged fraternity, there was a thing called Hell Week. That was ages past.
They still do that.
No, I do what you're talking about.
And please. Our assignment was to worship at Friendship, which was a great assignment. The place was packed, overflowing. So much so that we could not get a seat in the main sanctuary. We had to listen from the overflow section. And Dr. Thurman preached from the 139th Psalm, which was central, I think, in his total ministry. And his subject was living under the scrutiny of God. And I think it will still preach.
Yes.
Whither shall I go
From thy presence.
from thy presence? My Lord. Whither shall I go? Whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up to heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning,
Yes, sir.
and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. Everywhere we go, whatever we do, whatever we say, we do it, we say it, we act under
That's good.
the scrutiny
Mama.
of God.
Yes, sir. Talk now.
That's not only inspiring, but it could be frightening. And all of my thoughts,
My Lord. You know it.
all of my motives,
My Lord.
all of my actions are carried out under the scrutiny of God. Fast forward. 1965, when we came home from Alabama, sharing in the Selma to Montgomery barge. I left Montgomery at the end of the barge, didn't participate in the full barge. Boarded a plane with Dr. King and other persons sharing in the leadership of the movement. We made a brief stop. It was a charter plane in Birmingham. And a reporter got off the plane to call in, I suppose, and then got back on the plane and announced that a white female from Michigan, Viola Craig, had been killed transporting people from the march back to Selma. That was a black man, young man, in the car with her. And the only reason he was not killed, they thought he was dead. And he placed himself in a still position, of course, with the blood of Viola. So he was covered.
Not of blood. Not mine.
My Lord.
Jesus, that's something. That's the story. That's the story, yes, sir.
He lived.
Covered on
He
blood.
survived,
My
covered
Jesus.
with the blood
My Lord.
of Viola Craig. When I returned home, living in Cincinnati at the time, Dr. Howard Thurman was speaking, and that was an appeal that he would say something as a memorial. It was during the Lenten season in honor and memory of Viola Craig's. And he spoke that day on the suffering of the innocent. It can be found in one of his meditations. I don't recall.
Disciplines of the Spirit.
Amen. That's why it's just good to meet with brilliant folks. We got an amen here.
Yeah.
And he referenced a writer by the name, I believe, of Margaret Kennedy.
Yep.
Talked about.
You want to look at it?
Yes. No, hold on.
Okay.
Amen. Who advanced the thought of the thesis that God tolerates the rest of us because a few innocent people are willing to suffer for all of us.
Look out.
And I believe he quoted from her, "Their shoulders hold the sky suspended. They stand, and earth's foundations stay."
Jesus.
The suffering of the innocent. And then he drew from an African American spiritual. Were you there?
Wow.
He talked about the incident, the raw material on Highway 80 between Montgomery and Selma. And he talked about all of the folk who were there. The woman who died. The prophet who led the march. Those who followed and those who joined that ecumenical gathering. And then he said, and then he talked about the murderers of Jimmy Lee Jackson,
Yes.
the Reverend Reed, and Viola Craig, and all of the others whose names did not get in print. And then he said, were you there?
Wow.
Wow.
And then he answered the question, Dr. Brayson. He said, yes, we were all there. But the question is, who represented you?
Oh.
Wow.
Jesus. Wow.
My Lord.
We were all there. But who represented you? Were you represented? Let's update it.
My Lord.
What's the fellow who wears these fancy clothes who is about to go to jail and keeps on talking? Can't stop.
Roger
Stone.
Stones.
Were you represented by Roger Stone? I'm updating it now.
Oh, my Lord.
Fox
Right.
News,
Right.
the Klan,
Wow.
the neo-Nazis. Or were you represented
Wow.
by James Reed, Jimmy Lee Jackson, Viola Craig, and so Dr. King,
My Lord.
Mrs. Boynton, and you can go on. Now, when you preach that, give Dr. Thurman credit.
Will do.
I'm just a male carry. Now, a little window into my own life. Widowed and a single parent. And I knew that Dr. Thurman had lost his first wife after, I believe, 4 years of marriage. So, a friend who was hosting him communicated with me, and I said, I want to talk to Dr. Thurman. He said, oh yes, we have to get him to the airport, but I'm going to arrange for you to speak with him, and I did. He had given him the background. And I was waiting for sympathy. You know, the usual stuff we give out when we don't know what to say. And you've had that experience, and if you haven't, you will. When there are no words to say to a crushed, broken, beaten heart. And you feel obligated to say something, and say something stupid. But God is good and merciful. But let me get back. I went in to talk with Dr. Thurman, knowing what he had gone through as a young man. And he looked at me and said, whoever has control of the thermostat of your soul will control your life. And then he looked and said, no individual has a right to control the thermostat of your soul. Because whoever controls the thermostat will control the temperature. That territory belongs to God. No mother, no father, no sister, no brother, no husband, no wife has the right to have control of the thermostat of your soul. That territory belongs to God. And then he left. And went on and caught a plane. Wow. And went back to San Francisco.
So profound indeed.
I was waiting for sympathy, and he gave me wisdom.
Exactly. Right.
Truth. Understanding. Strength. So that was 1965, and here I am repeating it. You quit mine 65 to how many years is that?
English. 60 years or something. About 60 years.
About 54 years. Do it the old way. 5 from 9. And so much you bring down. But he had that kind of impact on individuals and people on a person-to-person basis as well as a community basis, and from pastor to parishioners and from teacher to student, from friend to friend. That's the kind of Howard Thurman I met and knew. I heard him speak in the National Baptist Convention. I don't remember what year it was. Not many people heard him because they were not listening. You had to listen to Dr. Thurman. And I think Dr. J.H. Jackson invited him because it would give to him some, credits as president of the National Baptist Convention. But I hope I'm not being judgmental. But Dr. Thurman spoke, and he talked about the meaning of freedom. If I recall, I didn't take notes, I couldn't, I was too caught up what was being said. He said, there is the freedom of innocence, the freedom of a child. A child is innocent. But the question is, can you go from innocence to knowledge without guilt? Oh, God. Now that's the whole story of the Garden of Eden. And that's one stroke. A child is innocent, not good.
That's a
that's a word.
And that is the freedom of innocence. But that doesn't last long.
No.
And then he said there's the freedom of resignation. And he gave an example of his student days when he was going through what was then called Beaver Slide, not far from Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, and AU. And he said somebody, a brother, was sitting on a can or something, singing, been down so long, down don't worry me. Totally exhausted to the extent that injustice no longer disturbed him. So he was free out of his total exhaustion. No protest, no challenge, just total surrender to all of the environmental pressures and injustice, whatever. So he was free out of exhaustion. And then he said there is the freedom of struggle and triumph. The moment he said that, you could feel everybody saying, well, that's the kind of freedom I want. And that's the kind of freedom that Dr. Randolph Gracie has been fighting for all of these years. Through dangers, toils, snares, clans, neo-Nazis, bombing threats, struggle, over the haters and the liars and the conscienceless and the rulers of darkness. Dr. Thurman didn't say all of that. I just got happy. I maintain that all, and this is not original with me, that all great souls, all great leaders, all great people must have a sense of humor. And there is also a relationship between hope and humor. Perhaps when we are together again, God willing, we can give you some illustrations of that. But Dr. Thurman had a great sense of humor. He could leave you wordless, but he could also leave you laughing. He talked about his college days when he was studying at Morehouse. One of his teachers was Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. And he said that Dr. Mays was such a disciplinarian that he didn't allow anybody to come late and be admitted to his class. And he said one, you know, in those days the bell would ring and the doors would close. And he said that Dr. Mays would stand at the door holding his watch. And anybody who was 1 minute or less than a minute late, they couldn't get into class. And he said there was a gentleman who came to class one day and the bell rang and he got his right foot in the door, and Dr. Mays looked at him and said, "Your foot is on time, but the rest of you is late. Your foot may come in,
Yes.
but the rest of you can't come in." And then Dr. Thurman said, now Dr. Mays, Ben Mays, he said, was from Epworth, South Carolina. I don't know how he got from Epworth, South Carolina to you can't come in. Great sense of humor. She said he talked about his hometown, his home community. He said people were looking at him and expecting a whole lot. And when he went away to school and studied under Rufus Jones, became a student of the Quaker tradition and read the books. Somebody back home, and what home was that? What hometown was that? Where did he grow up? Daytona. Somebody back in Daytona Beach said, you know, we thought we had a Moses. And Lord God, we got a mystic. He had a great sense of humor. Now let me go off script, if I were ever on it. The freedom movement required dedication, participation, demanding liberation, but it also required a sense of humor. You have to have hope and humor. One of the great examples that I like to here comes out of Birmingham, Alabama. My good friend, late friend, Dr. Fred Shuttlesworth, one of the most courageous prophets in the movement. Not enough is known about him, or he does not get credit. He invited Dr. King to Birmingham. He had been there struggling. His home was bombed on Christmas Day. And he was not asleep, but resting and discussing and planning for a demonstration the next day. And 16 sticks of dynamite went off. Dr. Shuttlesworth told me that he was resting, reclining on his bed. And the explosion was so powerful that it picked him up, knocked the bed from under him, and one of the rafters came down through the floor at the very spot where he was reclining. And he landed on the other side of the room on top of the mattress.
Jesus Christ.
And the police came after the bombing, and he said the chief of police came. It was a serious case. And said to him, Reverend, we didn't know it was going to get like this. It's dangerous here. And if I were you, I would get out of town. Reverend Shuttlesworth looked at him and said, yeah, but you ain't me.
Right.
And I ain't going nowhere. That kind of courage. I'm going to get back to Thurman in a minute. Dr. Shuttlesworth went to court, and on one occasion it was his own lawyer. Anybody here with a legal background? What do they say about people who try to figure out all
They have proof of science.
But anyway, Reverend Shuttlesworth went to court with his own lawyer, had this long legal pad and nothing on it. But he had a divine strategy. He knew that if he acted as his own attorney, he had the power to subpoena Bull Connor.
Oh my God.
Look out.
Good job.
And that's exactly what he did.
Yes.
He subpoenaed Bull Connor. Court is packed with black folk. Some nervous, wondering what's going to happen. So they brought Bull Connor in, swore him in as a witness. He took the oath. They had him state his name. Reverend Shuttlesworth stood up with his yellow legal pad. Nothing really written on it. Said, would the witness restate his name? And Bull Connor looked at the judge for help. And before anybody could say anything, Reverend Shuttlesworth said, Your Honor, would you please instruct the witness to answer my question? And the judge said, you have to answer his question. Reverend Shuttlesworth, state your name again. My name is Theophilus Eugene Connor. No, Theophilus. Let me get it right. Eugene T. Connor. What does the T stand for? Eugene Theophilus Connor. So then Reverend Shuttlesworth went on to ask him whatever he wanted to ask him. The courtroom is packed. He lost the case. Reverend Shuttlesworth did. But when all of those black folk who had packed out the courtroom left, oh, they said, Bull ain't so bad. You should have seen him trembling. They exaggerated it. They told all, even the folk who were not there, said, you know, I watched him in the courtroom. They went to the beauty shops and the barber shops, talking about what Shuttlesworth did to Bull Connor. They went to the mass meeting. Reverend Shuttlesworth got up to speak and said, you know, they've been calling him a bull, but he's just a steer. No, I wouldn't have said it. The place fell out laughing. And courage. Invigorating people. He demythologized Bull Connor in his own eyes. Hope and humor. And if you're going to be a leader, you got to have some humor. You got to learn to laugh at yourself. Dr. Thurman said when he was a pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church, Oberlin, Ohio, that was, you probably read this in some of his writings, that was a woman who came to church religiously every Sunday, sat on the front seat and would always go to sleep. On the front, every Sunday. She would come and sit and go to sleep. And he decided, the young pastor, he was going to confront her privately. He said to her, now, I noticed you go to sleep every Sunday. What's going on? She said, well, sometimes it takes you so long to get off. Because I can't hold out. He said, is that it? She said, but that's another reason. She said, all week long, I go through so much trouble. Can't sleep. And Sunday morning in Mount Zion is the only time I can get some peace. Wow. And a good nap. And then he said, now if somebody goes to sleep on you, don't wake them up. They deserve a good nap. That might be the best your sermon can do.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God.
Ambassador Young declares that every great leader has to have a great sense of humor. A lot of when we see Dr. Thurman years hence, we may not be able to connect total power with Thurman. Now, those are just a few remarks. And I haven't gotten to my notes yet. And some other things, but I'm going to stop. Help yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
thank
please,
you.
Let's talk to him,
And thank you for your presence and for allowing me to come, as they said in Troup County, and give a few
Scattering the bar.
remarks.
yeah.
But I'm going to go on. No, I'm not going to do that. In Dr. Thurman's book, The Growing Edge, he closes with a message. It's poetic, it's sermonic, it's inspiring. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. The birth of a child, life's most dramatic answer to death. Look well to the growing age. Wow. All around us, life is dying and new life is being born. Isn't that something we are experiencing now? Talk with Dr. Bracey and ask him about the struggle, court cases, the victories, the devil in the grove, the bombings of the couple. What's the name?
Inherited.
Yes. The slaughtering of children in Birmingham on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
And the head of the FBI hid the facts. Probably thousands of details that never came to light until the 1990s. And he had all, J. Edgar Hoover had all the information. Children dying. But all that time, a president was being born with a strange name.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he was.
Barack
That's right.
Hussein Obama.
Yes, yes.
Now you couldn't see Barack in the debris
Come on.
of the 16th Street Baptist Church
Jesus.
that Sunday morning.
My God.
You couldn't see him that day when my father in Troup County, Georgia walked 18 miles trying to vote. He went to one voting station. They said, "You're at the wrong place." You're supposed to go to Mountville. He walked to Mountville. They said, "You're at the wrong place." You're supposed to go to the Rosemont School. He walked to the Rosemont School. They said, "Boy, you're just a little late." My Lord, polls just closed. When the next election came around, my father was dead.
Jesus.
Killed prematurely in an automobile accident not far from where we live. So the voting rights bill couldn't dig him up and put flesh on his bones and a ballot in his hand. But every time I go to the polls, I go there in memory of.
Yeah.
Wow. And I go there because of.
Yes.
And I go there in spite of.
Yes.
Wow. That's your job. And Howard Thurman was sitting in tears at that railroad station. And the ticket agent said to him, "Boy, the regulations indicate that the tag for your..." Where somebody
Jesus.
at the borders.
Yeah, right.
Call somebody building a wall.
My God.
Talk, preacher.
Hallelujah. My Lord. Somebody
Look out.
in your life, whether you know it or not, is restoring your brokenness. Thank you.
Dr. Moss, Dr. Brace, we have time for a question or two.
Yeah.
Look, this is something that I was just thinking about in the city, and something that we talked about over the last few weeks. What would be your take on those who wanted Dr. Thurman to do more during the time of the Civil Rights Movement, who felt he wasn't doing enough?
Very good question. And Dr. Lerone Bennett asked me essentially the same question when he was writing an article for Ebony magazine some years ago. And my response essentially then and now is that we always need somebody to give to us the prophetic, spiritual, and moral foundation for the actions we should or should not take. And it was Dr. Thurman who gave us the ground, the theological, philosophical, moral, and spiritual grounds upon which to stand as we confronted a Wallace, a Bull Connor, racism. You need a spiritual foundation. Somebody who can interpret Scripture in such a way that it's clear and convicting and urgent. So when you go out to deal with the Trumps and the neo-Nazis and all of the other forces, you have a foundation upon which to stand. So what Dr. Thurman did was to prepare the medicine. He gave to us a spiritual foundation upon which to act, without which you cannot hold out. That's a limited response to a very profound question. Two of my teachers in college and seminary were students of Dr. Thurman. And one of them passed on to us one day in class something that Dr. Thurman had passed to them as seminary students. And then I later learned that one of Dr. Thurman's teachers had passed it on to him. And he said, no one is ever under obligation to preach a great sermon. It's identified with Dr. Thurman. It was passed on to him, and he passed it on to the next generation. But everyone is eternally obligated to grapple with great ideas. And if you grapple with great ideas in a consistent devoted, sincere way. Once in a while, you might preach a great sermon. Not every time, but now and then. So Dr. Thurman constantly gave to us the spiritual and moral content with which to grapple and be prepared to be activists. One of the dangers in every movement is to be activist oriented, void of content.
Wow. Whoa. Wow.
All right.
You become then vulnerable
Wow.
to your enemy, and if you're not careful, you will behave just like
Wow.
the evil you're trying to get rid of.
Right.
So we need the spiritual prophet and the teacher to equip us spiritually. One of the things that the press constantly misses. Dr. King was a student of Thurman. And I was told shortly after his death that he always carried one of Dr. Thurman's books, Jesus and the Disinherited. Dr. King was a person of prayer and meditation. Perhaps not as much as he wanted to be. Dr. Thurman raised the question one day, who is ministering to these individuals who are taking such critical action and making such momentous decisions about our national life? And that's a whole nother discussion. It's dangerous to have leaders without spiritual content.
Amen.
Making historic decisions about the destiny of the followers, and they have not taken time to spend time listening to the Holy Spirit. Now, some folk do nothing and pretend to be meditating, and they go to sleep.
All right.
But we need to be surrounded or undergirded by somebody. That's a long answer to a short question. Let me hear you. Fine.
I told Dr. Moss, he is indirectly the reason I'm in Orlando, and I'm pastor. This might be the second time he's heard this story, but he was preaching at the Progressive National Baptist Convention, and his subject was seats or service. And I came to Orlando, and I came to the Shiloh Church, and they were having trustee day. They were officer installation. And the Lord blessed me with a little memory. And so I stole that subject. And Dr. Moss did, when Zebedee comes to Jesus.
Yes.
and says to him, I want my boy, one to sit on your right hand and one to sit on your left.
Wow.
But Jesus says that is not mine to give. And Dr. Moss told him, I said, so many people are after the seat, but not the service.
My Lord.
And so when I preached it that day, I told him I didn't give him any credit either. But they said, man, where you get that from? And the people were so overwhelmed. They said, where you come from?
That brought you to Orlando.
And that brought me to that's the reason.
Wow.
You were, now, in relation to King, all you Morehouse men, Benjamin Elijah Mays, all of that, now you were seen as one of his lieutenants, correct? Okay, how did you get to know King?
First, by way of Morehouse. When I came to Morehouse, I met the King family. Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., Mrs. King, and Dr. King's younger brother, A.D. King. The King family, for some reason, embraced me. Toward my senior year, well, slightly before my junior year, I believe it was, Dr. King received his PhD from Boston University, and that was celebrated at Morehouse through Dr. Mays, because he would always take these kind of achievements and use them to challenge the students. Say, this is what a Morehouse man is supposed to do. This is what we expect of a Morehouse man. And he recited Dr. King, 25 years old, PhD, Boston University. New pastor, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. In 1955, at the National Baptist Convention, as a student, everybody was preaching and talking about the lynching of Emmett Till.
Oh, yeah.
I met Dr. King personally for the first time. Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor had just preached, and a group of ministers on the steps of the auditorium were discussing Dr. Proctor's sermon. Dr. King was in that group. And I had a chance to meet him on an informal basis with great appreciation and admiration. A few months later, the Montgomery protest was begun. And I got a chance to meet him in Atlanta with his family, hear him from various platforms, and he recommended me to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church when he left. But there were two conflicting prayers. He was praying that I would go, and I was praying that they wouldn't call me. My prayer. Fast forward. When my first wife died, Dr. King gave the eulogy. And when Edwin and I married over 50 years ago, ceremony. And that in addition to our movement activities, I became regional director of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Southern Ohio. Edwina was a staff member of SCLC, working out of the office every day. So we became, in a sense, a part of extended family. When, fast forward, A.D. King died, I was a pallbearer. When Mrs. King was killed, I was on the program. When Daddy King died, I was on the program. So our families have been intertwined since college days. When Bernice King acknowledged her call to the ministry and was ordained, I gave the ordination sermon. So it's been a great bond through the years.
Did you, I guess you attended Coretta's funeral too, Ms. Gross?
I was on the program. Bernice did the eulogy, but I was on the program.
Bernice eulogized someone?
Yes.
Oh. What about your lobby? What did you guys
Bernice, I think, I believe Bernice did the eulogy for Yolanda also.
Now, she was the baby. How much does she really remember about her dad? She remember quite a bit. It's interesting in the baby. Is the
She probably remembers more of the pain than some other things, but being so young.
She was very young.
But we remember more than we think. Dr. King was quite great with children. They remember him picking them up and putting them on top of the refrigerator. Having them jump.
Oh, I bet it was not like that.
While Mrs. King was, yes, almost fainting. But it was a great moment that he spent with the children, although he was on the road so much. It was from him I first heard the statement that if you can't have a lot of quantity time with children, make sure you have some quality time with them.
That's a word. You know, when I was in school at Thurman and Martin was up at Morehouse, he used to, you know, sometimes we were talking, he would have some real issues about people wanting him to follow.
Yes.
And his dad's footsteps, because he was named Martin III. We used to talk often. I told him, I said, you know, I said, everybody loves your dad. I said, I wish I really had met him and knew him. I said, but you know, he was really struggling with that. I said, but you have to make a decision. He said, I don't want to lead the people. He said, I don't want to be a preacher. I said, well, okay. I said, but you just have to find, you know, what works for you. I think one time he did serve in the Georgia Congress, I think one time somebody ran, but he was
County Commission.
Yeah, he was really struggling with that for a while at Morehouse. And he really didn't want people to know who he was. I said, what you mean you don't know who you are? Well, you look like him. You didn't know who you are. I mean,
230 miles across the state to the Reedsville State Prison. One of the reasons that letter has so much meaning to me is he was arrested for participating in our movement, student sit-in movement. I won't take time to give all the backstory here. But the judge in DeKalb County in Decatur sentenced him to 4 months hard labor on what was then the Georgia chain gang.
Wow. Georgia chain gang. Jesus.
Before the lawyers could make the appeal, they put chains on his body, threw him in the official police wagon with a police dog, and carried him alone 230 miles across the state of Georgia and put him in maximum security. It was the first and only time Dr. King went to jail alone. And he was arrested because he was helping us in the sit-in movement. What happened? We felt then and now that what the judge really was giving him was a death sentence. He was alone. Now they were going to put him out on public works, you know, with a pick and a shovel. He was not supposed to come back. That was October 1960. Appeals were made to Richard Nixon and John Kennedy. They were candidates for president. Nixon did not respond. Kennedy called Mrs. King and Robert Kennedy called the judge. I have said many times, I don't know what Robert Kennedy said to the judge, but when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Robert Kennedy, not the judge. Not sure he's going to be there. I'm going to ask Robert Kennedy, what did you say to that judge? The judge revoked his own sentence.
Wow.
Dr. King was released. Multi-millions of leaflets were put together and distributed in Atlanta, Cleveland, Harlem, Chicago, Detroit, LA, all of the major urban centers in America. And guess what? Kennedy won the election.
See that?
Wow.
Is that how you won?
That's how Kennedy won the election. 113,000 votes nationwide. Somebody figured it out and said it was less than 1/2 vote per precinct. Dr. King elected Kennedy president from a jail cell in Georgia. Wow. Kennedy was assassinated. Johnson succeeded him as vice president, so Dr. King elected 2 presidents in less than 4 years from a jail cell. Wow. The historians are not going to tell you that because they don't understand the work of God through those who are called of God to do God's work.
Look at that. From a jail cell.
Fast forward. Carter ran for president, 1976.
Yeah.
He met with some of us privately and said, but for Martin Luther King Jr., I could not be running for president. Then he said it publicly. A 3rd person elected president. 2 from a jail cell and a 3rd from the grave.
Wow.
Clinton
Full court, Doc. Full court.
My Lord.
called some of us together and said, I stand on the shoulders of Martin Luther King Jr. And if you examine his cabinet,
Oh, yeah.
folk from the movement, Andrew Young,
Yeah.
Lamont Gottlieb,
Green.
Green.
That's
Any
Jackson's homeboy. No, it's Bud, that's Jackson. Problems and crime.
Here, a third president.
My God.
And then
Look at it, there it is.
There we go.
There it is.
There it is.
November
Uh-huh.
2008,
Yeah.
That one.
Go ahead, that one.
before midnight,
That one.
around 11 o'clock,
Jesus.
the press announced
My God.
the next
Absolutely.
President of the United States of America,
Yes.
Barack Hussein Obama,
Whew.
standing on the show.
Absolutely.
That's why I can't get weary now,
Won't you get married?
because Trump can't last always.
No.
Sometimes we have to thank God for our toils and snares.
Yes.
Look at it.
Hugo was exiled for 20 years and wrote his best books
Yes,
and said to a friend, why was I not exiled sooner?
Yes, sir. For his best stuff. Exile.
That's the way God
Absolutely.
works. And that's why it's so important. But this class, you are the prophets. My evening sun is sinking fast. My day is almost gone. I just had a birthday a
Happy
few minutes
belated.
ago.
Oh,
Oh, Troy.
that's fresh.
I'm 84 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
My God. Praise God.
So, sunset is on the way. I'm nearing Jordan. But it's in your hand. In your hand. In your hand.
My Lord. Yeah, truly been a blessing.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you. You won't get a